A swarm of 15 Ukrainian drones rushed across the Gulf of Finland toward Luga, the biggest Baltic port in Russia, at 6:15 local time. The Russians referred to it as untouchable due to its strong defense. Following a nighttime flight of 960 kilometers, the engines were running hot and the fuel gauges were getting closer to empty. Before a Russian patrol emerged through the early mist, everything appeared to be normal. As tracers burst from below, the formation leader abruptly yanked hard to the right. They had been noticed by the Russian patrol boat. Walking fire over their flight path is its 14.5mm machine gun. Pilots would have felt the pressure waves when the rounds passed between two drones in close proximity. However, these lacked pilots. Instead, they were operated from bunkers close to Kiev, watching grainy satellite broadcasts. The patrol boat fired 3 missiles. In the early morning light, Igla-S missiles intended for helicopters were instead frantically firing at shadows. Like starry birds, the drone dispersed. While some dived to wave height, others climbed. One missile spiraled into the Baltic after losing its lock entirely. Another detonated between targets without causing any harm. Empty air triggers its proximity fuse. The trailing Beaver was transformed into a fleeting fireball that dispersed into the water when the third struck its target. After regrouping, the 14 survivors advanced on Luga, which was now just 40 kilometers away. They were illuminated at that point by the S-400 batteries. After following them for several minutes, the S-400's tombstone radar only now became visible, transitioning from search to targeting mode. These were not drones used for business purposes. These Beavers were UJ-26, specially designed weapons capable of devouring even Russia's most sophisticated SAMs for breakfast and requesting more. The Russian radar operator was going to find out why these $35,000 drones were a threat to his trillion-ruble air defense system. The S-400 started spraying the Beavers with radar energy as soon as they were within range. The S-400 measures the signal's return after directing a concentrated radar beam at 3 GHz. Imagine it as sonar, but instead of sound, it uses radio waves. The issue is that, in comparison to metal aircraft, the fiberglass and carbon fiber materials used to make these Beavers only reflect 10% of radar energy. They appear smaller than seagulls on the screen at 40 kilometers. The operator was unable to obtain a secure lock, so he made a creative attempt. Track first with missile firing. To provide the batteries with more accurate targeting information, use the missile's own seeker. Two $2 million 48 N6DM missiles, each intended to destroy 100 fighter jets, burst from their launchers. Here, however, physics turned out to be Ukraine's buddy. The drones promptly plunged to a height of 10 meters over the waves in the Baltic. The missiles attempted to follow, diving at a 70-degree angle, but their control fins functioned similarly to the wings of an airplane. To steer, they require airflow. The fins stalled at that sharp angle, sending both rockets plummeting into the ocean. By using 9MN96E2 missiles with gas dynamic thrusters, tiny rocket motors that fire sideways and enable 90-degree spins even in the absence of airflow, the S-400 crew changed tactics. These missiles were not like the others. They were able to chase targets down to wave height, turn on a dime, and pull 60 grams. The missile calculated the intercept spot and made adjustments as the lead Beaver attempted to flee by banking hard left. Impact time is 3 seconds. The warhead exploded in 2 seconds, launching 200 pieces of tungsten into the air. The drone broke up into confetti made of carbon fiber. Another target was hit by a second missile, but the debris caused an unforeseen issue. 13 radar returns turned into hundreds, as the survivors were hidden by wreckage strewn over the sky. The remaining 13 drones dispersed, dodging a hawk like a group of rabbits. Russian air defenders had witnessed this in earlier battles. Some climbed, others dove, some went left, and some went right. They had already established what they called a box by placing 4 painter systems in overlapping fields of fire. The drones would enter someone's engagement zone regardless of how they flew. The Panthers were created especially to counter this threat, combining cannons for close-quarters defense with long-range missiles. Imagine them as the last line of defense when all else fails, similar to a soccer goalkeeper. Compared to the S-400, each Pantsir employs a distinct engagement concept. They employ shoot, look, shoot instead of shooting several missiles at once. Fire one missile, check to see if it strikes, make adjustments, then fire again. By doing this, accuracy against moving targets is maximized. The 1st Pantsir fired a 57E6 missile at the leader after locking onto these drones in formation. The drones quickly performed a wagon wheel movement, keeping forward velocity while spiraling around a shared center point. Imagine passengers on a forward-moving carousel. The missile's proportional navigation system, which determines where to intercept based on a consistent target, was confused by the continually shifting aspect angle. Motion. The Pantsir gunner turned to his 30mm dual-barrel cannons, which could fire 5,000 rounds per minute. Rather than attempting to track individual drones, he made a beaten zone by packing so much lead into a cube of airspace that anything going through would be struck. This area was entered by 4 drones. On the opposite side, 2 appeared. The arithmetic was straightforward yet hard. There are 9 drones left, over a dozen Russian missiles, and hundreds of artillery rounds used. They hadn't even arrived at the port yet. The Leningrad Oblast Command Center was lighted with warning lights that depicted comparable conflicts occurring at Kursk, Bryansk, and Rostov. In western Russia, 14 other drone groups were launching simultaneous attacks. Each and every air defense battery was activated. No reinforcements would be present. Both the drones and the Russians were alone in this situation. The remaining drones kept moving in the direction of their target, aware that the hardest part was still to come. The Kasuka-4 is an electronic warfare vehicle that looks like a mobile shipping container. But inside was jamming equipment valued at $20 million. When the 9 surviving drones approached us, Luga, the system activated, and interference inundated the electromagnetic spectrum. In order to function, the Kasuka floods radio frequencies with noise. Imagine trying to talk on the phone while someone is using a megaphone to blast static into your ear. It sweeps between 1.2 and 5.8 GHz to find the control frequencies that link the drones to their operators in Ukraine, 1,000 kilometers distant. The Russian EW operators used a technique called sweep and dwell to swiftly search the spectrum for active signals, then concentrating all of the jamming power on those specific frequencies. In just a few seconds, they were able to identify 2.4 GHz broadcasts. The Kuka created an electromagnetic noise wall by focusing its 20W beam. But the Beavers weren't using a simple remote control. They were frequency hopping, switching between 128 different channels per second in a pseudo-random manner. Think of it as a conference call, when there is only one person who knows the order in advance, and they keep switching phone numbers. Jamming shouldn't be possible in theory. But the Russians had an alternative. The Russians responded by flooding the entire spectrum at all frequencies with barrage jamming. The concept is simple in theory. If you can't find the needle, set the entire haystack on fire. This should have completely severed the control link, but the drones kept flying. They had switched to autonomous mode using terrain contour matching by comparing radar altimeter readings to preloaded topographic maps. Every building, bridge, and hill had been mapped and coded. The drones knew exactly where they were in the absence of any external connections. But autonomy had its own problems. 3 drones hit a construction crane that wasn't there when their maps were made 6 months ago. The sudden apparition of the metal tower amid the fog was too late to avoid. The effects were immediate. For the drone, steel and carbon fiber are never a good combination. Despite having only 18% of their battery remaining, 6 survivors continued. The calculations became important. Enough power to reach the target, but not enough to move in an evasive manner. This was their only opportunity. Meanwhile, the S-400 battery commander had to make an unimaginable decision. Each of his remaining $2 million missiles is meant to destroy aircraft worth 100 times that sum. The problem was that these outdated guns required optical aiming. Someone must be able to see the target in order to shoot it. At a speed of 150 km/h, the drones occasionally executed barrel rolls every 2 to 4 seconds. The targeting computer needed 3 seconds of continuous flight to identify a firing solution. It didn't understand. In an attempt to find a connection, the gunners resorted to World War II tactics, dispersing tracers across the sky. A fortuitous explosion caught a drone mid-roll and tore apart its fiberglass body. 5 drones remain. The distance to Luga port is about 8 kilometers. However, this is the issue with real combat. There are other issues to be worried about besides man-made weapons. As the drones closed with the port, the increased warmth caused the fog that hung low to the deck to rise. The fog that had previously spared them now reappeared with a vengeance. It swiftly turned the battlefield into a ghostly maze, rendering million-dollar sensors useless. The fog limited visibility to 30 meters. The Russians could not see the drones. The drones could not see the harbor. Everyone was flying now, fighting blindly. The Pantsir's thermal imager, designed to detect heat despite smoke and darkness, could normally observe aircraft at a distance of 5 kilometers. However, fog disperses infrared radiation in the same way as it disperses visible light. The 200-meter detection range was lowered. The defenders reached area saturation by firing blind at the approaches they calculated the drones had to make. In the expectation that the drones would pass through them, they were erecting lead walls at certain GPS positions. 5 Ukrainian drones, equipped with radar altimeters that were constantly pinging, dropped to a height of 3 meters above the Baltic waters to stop crashing into the waves. Any video stream was reduced to a useless fuzz due to the salt spray covering their camera lenses. The Ukrainian operators saw nothing but gray static over satellite data channels. To fly, they were merely using GPS coordinates, trusting algebra to guide them across the gloomy sky to Luga's gas complex. Frustrated by a dearth of hits, the Russians utilized their GPS spoofing technique to broadcast fake position signals from powerful transmitters. This technique overpowers the weak satellite signals with stronger fake ones, giving GPS receivers the impression that they are in an entirely different place. Imagine if your car's navigation suddenly alerts you to the fact that you are in a new city. Using false coordinates and banking abruptly to the right, 2 drones flew directly into the water. The splash was hidden by the fog. Only brief radar returns that vanished. 3 drones remain. Their backup inertial navigation systems keep them on course in spite of the GPS lies. Port security officers utilize IGLA shoulder-fired missiles mounted on towers and rooftops. The EGLAS seeker uses a nitrogen-cooled sensor to detect heat at wavelengths between 3 and 5 microns. Human vision has a range of 4 to 7 microns. The EGLAS can scan farther into the infrared and detect temperature fluctuations as small as half a degree, whereas the Beaver's little 20-horsepower engine ran only 40 degrees above the surrounding air temperature. Against the warm Baltic fog, it was hardly noticeable. After hearing drones hover overhead, the soldiers fired ambush rounds from the rear, where the exhaust heat was highest. One missile struck its target, causing the proximity fuse to explode 5 meters from a drone. Shrapnel tore away composite skin and control cables. The drone landed on a farm with storage tanks. There were still 2 survivors navigating between 40-meter-tall gasoline tankers. An Mi-8 helicopter blasted overhead. Door gunners aim PKM machine guns at shadows shrouded by fog. The helicopter pilot tried to use rotor downwash to force drones into obstacles. They could crash against tank walls due to gusts of 60 km/h. However, the downwash also removed some fog, which momentarily enhanced drone cameras. The enormous cryogenic processing facility in front of them was therefore visible to the operators for brief periods of time. Uncommanded planes were spotted by the facility's automated safety systems as they approached. Emergency procedures were initiated using threat assessment algorithms, which are typically intended to stop unintentional aircraft strikes. The complex was filled with warning sirens. Thousands of cubic meters of ethane and methane were released during emergency venting in order to avert catastrophic overpressure in the event that the tanks were ruptured. The facility was covered in an unseen cloud of flammable gas that was waiting for a spark to ignite it into a gigantic fuel-air explosive. The defenders had unintentionally produced the ideal environment for the greatest devastation. To intercept spots, water cannon trucks raced. Their operators are attempting to use streams of high pressure to bring down drones. These were industrial tools capable of punching through timber walls at a distance of 50 meters, not your backyard super soakers. One drone went straight into a column of water. Its propeller snapped like a twig due to the pressure. It fell upon the concrete, unharmed but with the warhead intact. The last Beaver changed direction, and its thermal camera eventually locked onto the cryogenic processor's distinctive signature. It is colder than anything else on the board, -163 degrees. The operator accepted the 2-second delay that rendered precision flying at this distance all but impossible by switching to manual control via the Iridium satellite link. With 12% of its battery life left, the drone could fly for about 90 seconds. It followed a winding route through the tangle of towers and pipes. With every move, valuable power is burned. At the sound of its motor, security personnel opened fire with rifles and shotguns. Metal infrastructure is sparked by bullets. The operator was left flying on the last known position and dead reckoning when one pellet cluster broke the camera. The impact time is 10 seconds. 5 seconds. The motors started to lose power when the battery level reached a crucial point, but momentum would get it the last distance. The final Beaver drone battled its way through the refinery's three-dimensional labyrinth of catwalks, towers, and pipelines. Due to multipath interference, its civilian GPS device, which is accurate to 5 meters on a good day, displayed position inaccuracies of 30 meters. In addition to the more powerful GPS spoofing, signals reflecting off metal buildings produced misleading readings. Only simple telemetry was visible to the operator in Ukraine via a 2-kilobit Iridium satellite connection. Speed: 40 km/h. Altitude: 3 m. Battery: 8%. 285 degrees is the target bearing. As the drone flew near its program coordinates, there was no radar or video, just numbers that updated every 2 seconds. Precision was unachievable due to the 2-second control lag. The drone had already advanced 20 meters when the operator gave the order to turn left. He was forced to fly on guesswork, speculating about the drone's location rather than its actual location. Similar to playing a video game where the screen displays the events of the last 2 seconds. He saw the failed camera, a huge cylindrical tower, pipes covered in silver insulation, warning signs in Cyrillic, and the cryogenic fractionation unit, the center of the complex where gas condensate was divided into valuable components through the static. Security personnel used their final line of defense, more trucks equipped with water cannons. With its operator guiding the target like a hunter shooting clay pigeons, one gun tracked the drone's sound. The Beaver's tail was fiercely spun by the water jet. The gyroscope of the drone struggled to maintain stability. The last reserves are being depleted by motors roaring at maximum power. 5% battery warning. The operator was aware that he just had one chance. He converted altitude to speed by pushing the nose down, diving in the direction of the target's base. An invisible cloud of methane, ethane, and propane was produced by emergency venting, an ideal fuel mixture just itching to catch fire. Iron oxide that burns at 2500 degrees, aluminum powder, and thermite-enhanced charges are all present in the drone's 20-kilo warhead. Water or foam cannot be used to put out thermite. It burns continuously till the fuel is used up. It's hot enough to melt steel in a matter of seconds. Impact detonation, a straightforward mechanical trigger that required no electronics, was used to set the warhead. Impact time is 3 seconds. The motors immediately stopped when the battery entirely died. However, physics won out. A drone weighing 40 kilos and moving at 15 meters per second has significant momentum. In uncanny silence, it glided the last 50 meters, a ballistic projectile that complies with Newton's principles. In the hopes that it would miss, fall short, or strike something non-critical, security personnel held their breath. The drone crumpled on steel with a metallic crunch as it struck the fractionation column's base precisely where the operator had aimed. Nothing happened for a heartbeat. The thermite then caught fire. In about 2 seconds, the first explosion, a tiny, white-hot flare, burned through the steel column wall. Liquid hydrocarbons were quickly vaporized when superheated metal was sprayed into the pressure tank. More combustible gas was released as the pressure rise burst nearby pipes. The vapor that had been expelled then caught fire. Every window within a kilometer was broken by the fuel-air explosion, which grew at 3,000 ms and created a crushing overpressure wave. Bright orange against the morning mist, the fireball climbed 200 meters. However, this was only the start. A boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion occurred at the facility. Devastating explosive force is produced when pressurized liquid gas abruptly depressurizes, expanding 600 times in volume. Every ruptured vessel led to the failure of nearby vessels. A series of devastating events that took over the complex in a matter of minutes. The $2 billion cryogenic processor, which was built to endure hurricanes and earthquakes, crumbled into twisted metal. Satellites from the Estonian border would be able to see the fire for 6 days. Ukraine's deepest strike to date is symbolized by a pillar of smoke. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to my channel, WW2 Revealed, for more incredible stories and untold moments from history.